Well, hello, friends. It's always hard to start a session right after lunch. So we're going to be as loud and boisterous and exciting and definitely interesting so that you all do not fall asleep after you've had that nice lunch. My name is Mai-Anh Tran. I'm the Associate Vice President of Philanthropic Services at the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation. And I am thrilled to be here with you all today and have an amazing panel who has so much expertise to share around the world of philanthropy and entrepreneurship. So in this session, we're going to talk about how philanthropy plays an important role in supporting entrepreneurship and the programs that also support them, especially the BIPOC and women-led entrepreneurs, so they too can be part of the fabric of a vibrant economy in Minnesota. We're going to take a deep, deep dive into the life cycle of how philanthropic giving can create next generations of successful entrepreneurs, and maybe some of them are sitting right here in this audience and then also at home. So joining me today on the panel is Jacqui Dorsey. Jacqui is a principal at Vistendal Morsch, did I say that wrong? Vistendal Morsch, Dorsey and Hahn, and she's also a philanthropist. I had to get that right because of the partners here. You know, we want them to make sure that their names are pronounced correctly. In her practice, she handles trust and estates and business transactions and also family law. Her experience started before she earned her legal degree when she worked as a legal assistant and law clerk for 20 years in Beverly Hills, Seattle, Phoenix, the Twin Cities, and Northfield. Jacqui was an adjunct professor at Mitchell Hamlin College of Law, teaching estate and trust. That's Jacqui. Next, we have Conrad Nguyen. He is the president and chief impact officer of CoreTech. He spent 20+ years in various corporate leadership roles, leading global teams from sales, marketing, R&D, manufacturing, and operations. And 3 years ago, he acquired a startup called CoreTech. He is described by his peers as smart, focused, innovative, and tenacious, all the great qualities of a successful leader and entrepreneur. And at the end of the panel here, we have Andy O'Leary. He is our Chief Advancement Officer at the Metropolitan Economic Development Association, also called MEDA. For the past 7 years, he has led the philanthropy, marketing, capitalization of loan fund, and strategy for MEDA. He lives on a farm in southeast Minnesota with his wife and son and many, many animals, from what I hear. So this is your panel today. Please give them a welcome and round of applause. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Okay, so let's get this conversation started. So for many entrepreneurs in this audience and watching online, I'm guessing that you've spent a lot of time thinking about how, or you haven't spent time thinking about how philanthropic giving and organizations like the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation and its donors have a direct impact on entrepreneurship and startups. Many folks start thinking about seed rounds and VCs, but you have a lot of community foundations and other philanthropic organizations across the state that are highly invested in people like you. For instance, a member organization for philanthropy called the Minnesota Council on Foundations, they lead the Minnesota Impact Investing Initiative called MI3. And MI3 is a collaboration of investors and partners with Cogent Consulting to build support for impact investment strategies targeting communities all across the state. They collaborate with small and large foundations, local government agencies, and individuals to catalyze the growth of impact investing in Minnesota through a coordinated investment strategy to build capital, capacity, and to scale. These projects support home ownership, job creation, small business growth, and increase access to rental housing, healthcare, and education in Minnesota, and so far has committed about $112 million. So a lot of money being invested in startups. So I'll tell you, at the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, we also have seen an interest by our donors over the past few years in impact investing, also known as program-related investments. And we match those dollars at the foundation when our donors give those dollars. And so far, we've invested over $2 million in small businesses. One of the organizations that we have partnered with to do this work is MEDA, and their mission is to help BIPOC entrepreneurs successfully create racial economic equality, because we know that successful BIPOC entrepreneurs is the clearest path to creating wealth. So my first question is for Andy, who's from MEDA. Can you share a little bit about the organization's model, Andy, and how the mission helps grow a diverse community of entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for attending in person and online. At MEDA, our mission is to help BIPOC entrepreneurs succeed. If you're unfamiliar with the term BIPOC, it is Black, Indigenous, people of color entrepreneurs. We work with BIPOC entrepreneurs exclusively. We were founded over 50 years ago. Our founders believed that wealth creation was a primary strategy in addressing racial economic disparities, and that successful BIPOC entrepreneurship was the clearest path to creating wealth. We deliver on this mission through 4 primary pillars of work. Number 1 is business consulting. We work with entrepreneurs who have worked in their industries for years, decades, and help them become managers and owners, which is a different skill set than being a worker. Many of our clients come to us as experts in their field, but not experts in scaling companies. So we provide the training and the support for that. Secondly, and one of the main limiters to growth of BIPOC-owned businesses is capital, commercial lending. We are a certified community development financial institution with $65 million in lendable assets. We do that across St. Paul and the East Metro, Minneapolis, statewide, and as well as nationally. We provide term debt, lines of credit, 504 real estate loans, those sort of things, and we do some dequity in BIPOC-owned businesses. Third, we connect BIPOC contractors with public and private contracting opportunities. We operate the Ascend Twin Cities Center as well as the Minnesota MBDA Center, both of which are focused on providing the training, skills, capital, and support services to win a government or private contract, and then the support, whether it's capital or consulting and that kind of stuff, to deliver on that contract. And finally, we focus a lot on mergers and acquisitions. We see mergers and acquisitions as a strategy to accelerate the wealth creation we're trying to do with entrepreneurs of color. We are seeing great demand as we emerge from the pandemic. Prior to this year, so the 5 years before, we did 19 mergers and acquisitions with about $350 million in total enterprise value. In 2022 alone, we're going to do 16 mergers and acquisitions, exceeding that $350 million level, with more coming. In addition, and if you think about the reshuffling of the economy after the pandemic, businesses closing, businesses opening, the market share that's out there, new services, that kind of stuff, that makes a lot of sense. And then secondly, the gray tsunami. So we have aging white entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy, leave their business behind, but maybe their kids don't want to run the business, they don't have kids, or they want to do it in a way to have social impact. So we work with a lot of majority business owners, white business owners, to turn their businesses into BIPOC-owned. For us, we look at our impact being at the scalable business level. Whether you are a high growth, high potential startup in a high growth industry with a good business plan, we we can work with you, we'll work with you. If you are a scaling BIPOC-owned business, whether you're $100,000 and wanting to go up to $250,000 in revenue, or $250,000 to $1 million, $1 million to $10 million, we have the technical assistance, the business consulting, and the capital to help you do that. We also work with our equity clients to provide them the capital tools and the TA to help them grow in order to be successful. We do this because we look at these scalable businesses that are increasing their impact on the economy. They're also increasing employee count, and that has ripple effects across the community, whether it's, we look at solving economic disparities or addressing economic disparities as having these ripple effects on healthcare outcomes, transportation disparities, education, criminal justice. Those sort of things all come in part from economic disparity. So we really focus on where can we have an impact. And we know our interventions work. We've been around for 50 years. 56% of our clients' employees are people of color. Our borrowers pay an average salary of $44,500 per year. And our mission is to create wealth. And the average in the Twin Cities, 69% of white-owned families own their own home. After working with us for 3 to 5 years, 67% of our clients own their own home. So leveraging entrepreneurship to bring parity between BIPOC entrepreneur families and white families. So we are really focused on that community impact and that work, and get to work with people like Conrad and entrepreneurs like him across the country, both through mergers and acquisitions and other things.
So that's the amazing thing about organizations like MITA, right? So you've got people who can raise money, but you don't always necessarily have all the skill sets to really build and scale your business. And Conrad is a great example of a leader and an entrepreneur himself who acquired a business and has taken it to scale based on the support and wraparound services from MITA. Conrad, tell us a little bit about your organization or your company, and then also share a little bit about what the real life example was for you working with MITA, because we heard the numbers, we heard how successful it is. Tell us your experience with that.
Well, thank you so much, Mai-Anh, and thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure and a privilege. My core tech specializes in connecting diverse talents to company and government agencies. And we operate within 3 divisions. We have a project management division, a facility supports services division, and then a staffing division. It's been around for about 50 years, and I did not start that because I'm not really smart enough to start anything. I'm more what they call an optimizer. I actually grew up in the corporate environment, and thanks to MITA, who was really being supportive when I decided to leave my corporate role and venture into entrepreneurship, and having an organization such as MITA being there to provide in the acquisitions space we call due diligence. That's where you're trying to vet out if what you're buying is exactly what you thought it was. They were there on my side. I came to the table to negotiate with the selling agency, and there were MITA supporting me. So I came in not as an entrepreneur, but actually a group. So it gives you that gravitas, which is super important in the acquisition space. But more importantly, they gave me the confidence and a lot of support and the financial aspect, which I could talk about in a bit.
And tell us a little bit about how MITA helped propel you in that phase, because when we were talking earlier and you were telling me about the sweet spot for MITA, there's a lot of different services, obviously, that they provide, from startup to your acquisition and merger space. But what really helped you? What did you use the capital for, Conrad, to really propel your business?
All right. Just want to make sure. So you're asking me about the scaled up phase and how MITA. So you hear this often in about small businesses as well as minority-owned businesses. The number one challenge for us is really working capital. And when I say that, it's not so much just to stay afloat, But for a company such as Cortec, when we, on average, on a monthly average, our account receivable could go up to $1 million, meaning we have to front a lot of the money for about 90 to 120 days, pay our employees, be able to operate the company, successfully during those time, and then our clients or whoever we're serving pay us. So within that time frame, we need money to stay afloat, and that's where META was there to be that kind of support system to keep us going, especially during COVID time when it was really scary and you don't know what's going to happen. Our clients could cancel on us any day, and having them come to the table and say, hey, we will support you with the working capital to get you through this. And that meant a whole world to us.
The other thing that we talk a lot about in the philanthropic space is diversity, equity, inclusion. And when we spoke, Conrad, you talked about that, those practices are embedded in your company and they're really important. Tell us why.
Well, it's probably a little bit more personal because I grew up in a very humble beginning. I was a refugee, and I spent years in the refugee camp, and I was dreaming of aspiring to be somebody. And eventually I got into corporate world, and I worked my way up, and just keep climbing that corporate ladder. But then that yearning for change, for something better, was always there for me, and it felt like that I could do more. And that's why I kind of left that world and got into the entrepreneurship to follow and pursue my dream. As far as the DEI aspect of it, I just realized that big companies are very supportive of the DEI initiatives, but sometimes those support normally comes from the top. You read about them, you hear about them, but it doesn't truly cascade down to the level where we as operators of the small business dealt with. And sometimes it actually could be a negative when we talk about DEI. And I felt like, that's the part where I could fill in some of those void. And that void could be like in the space when I tell you that, we're doing project management. And the majority of my employees been there for 20 years, but it's within the same circle and same monolithic kind of group that we've been hiring, and I was able to challenge that through the lens of DEI, and then just broaden the slate of talents, and I began to bring in more women into construction, be able to bring in folks that never were, on a traditional path to be considered for a lot of the roles that we recruited in. And it's not that they weren't qualified, just because we recruit within a circle that I always ask our friends or friends of our friends, and that's really the same small circle. And that's one of the examples of how I could actually transform that.
That's great. So we have an attorney on our stage, and this is not a billable hour for her. So, but I don't know, are there any disclaimers we need to put out there, Jacqui, before
I
ask you some questions? Okay. So for the entrepreneurs who are here and who are watching us today, and who are still in their first seed round stage, as an attorney who supports many startups in your practice, what should they be mindful at this stage?
Well, I'm sure that you have all weighed the issues, and you probably know them just as well or better than I do. Certainly, one of the most important pieces as you're going into a startup phase is to make sure that you have somebody or some group that is helping you with the business end of things. I'm thrilled to hear what META does. If you can find somebody to teach you how to run a business, that is as important as moving forward with your dream, whatever product or service you plan to provide. That is an essential piece. Of course, in addition to funding, we all take a look at liability, protection from liability, which I also like to see as asset protection. So moving into this, it is important for you to consider the different types of asset protection or liability protection you can provide for yourself. I'm sure all of you have heard of corporate structure or an LLC, and certainly those are options, but you shouldn't feel as though you're pigeonholed into that. It's probably just as important or even more important to look at insurance. What kind of insurance is available to provide me with some protections? It may be less expensive than going through and starting a new business. You may consider it the first stage of your business. You don't have to be perfect right out of the box. It's almost better to think about growing your business in increments. It takes some discipline to do that, because when you've got dreams, you'd love to be able to see everything right now. So it's important to scale back a little bit. But certainly the insurance phase is important. And one other piece that many people don't think about is to get yourself acquainted. Do a quick search about bankruptcy laws. I'm not suggesting that we are going to think about divorce before we get married. That's not where I'm going with this. Instead, those laws also apply to anybody who wants to collect money from you. So there are exemptions for your home. There's an exemption for a vehicle. If your thought is that I am going to mortgage my home to the hilt and use all that money to pay off all this debt and take care of things, I would caution you to be thoughtful about it. If you do that, your home is one of those assets that has protections built in. That's when you start looking for outside funding. This is a very complicated issue when you're starting to look at funding, because people want something in return. Is your funder going to be satisfied with just a piece of paper, a promise to repay? Or will your funder require some collateral from you? And again, that would normally mean your home or assets of the business, and sometimes it's both. Another piece that funders would look at is equity. They would like to own a piece of the pie. How can you look at that in different perspective? Will this person have a voice? Is this going to be voting shares or non-voting shares? You have that ability to look into that and negotiate that with your funder. Are they preferred shares or common shares? And that's just the way it sounds. A preferred shareholder would get repaid before those owning common stock. Many times, our family members, as they loan us money and want a piece of the pie, they are relegated to the common stock. It's the outsiders who tend to get those preferred shares. Another thing to do is consider what your business is all about and what sorts of assets do you have. If there's a combination of assets, perhaps there's an asset, a separate asset that could be attached by that lender. For example, if you own real estate and you're running a business in a storefront, would you consider doing something with the real estate, which would be their preference, as opposed to an ownership interest in the business itself? So you can see I'm talking about thinking about these pieces in a more creative fashion than just straight line. And I have to believe that MEDA considers these issues as well when they are looking at different arenas of funding and the way that you build your business. So think creatively and don't say no right off the bat. Think about scalability. How can you start a little bit smaller and feel some success or test a market before you go full bore?
That's great practical advice. I'm one who loves to live through stories, Jacqui. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but you are on the spotlight, so I'm going to put you on the spot anyways. Tell us a story that kind of resonates with you or resonates on this topic that, you know, is funny, interesting, or like, oh my gosh, this was the worst case scenario that could possibly happen to somebody. So do you have a story that's top of mind that you can share with the audience that really kind of undergirds all of this practical advice you just gave us?
Well, probably unfortunately, the stories that I would have would sometimes revolve around somebody who chose not to accept advice. When somebody's doing really well, I don't always see them back in my office. If they are doing well, they're moving along. But I have had clients that have come back and said, "Oh my gosh, Jacqui, you're right. I should have listened to you. I should not have given away or sold 60% of my business and given a board seat to one of my funders because I just got fired." So this is a very dramatic view of what can happen when you aren't careful and if you aren't thoughtful about the way that you establish the structure of your business. Now, admittedly, the business wasn't doing great, and the creditors really needed to take over that business so that they could try to recover part of their money. However, you know that you entrepreneurs put a lot of your own money, your own time, your energy, your hopes and dreams, and to have those decisions immediately taken out of your hands really felt like a slap in the face. Not just the normal, yeah, I knew there was some risk in going into this, but it was, I never expected this. I never expected this. So think about it. Talk with people who have experience in the arena and consider the options. But the most important thing is ask questions. Go ahead and challenge the person who's giving you advice. Ask for more, ask for explanation.
So as I shared in the intro of Jacqui and her bio, she is also a philanthropist and a wonderful philanthropist at that through the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation. So I'm glad she's on stage with me today. But Jacqui, tell us a little bit about how you came to support entrepreneurs. I know that you talked about your family and the history of your family being entrepreneurs. So this is generations in the making. Share a little bit with us how your family gained their success through entrepreneurship, and then why you're doing this now through your fund.
This is deeply personal to me. I come from a family of immigrants, and you're gonna laugh when I tell you that one side of my family immigrated from Hawaii, but at the time they came to the mainland, Hawaii was not a part of the United States. When my grandmother and my mother came to the mainland and they moved to California, Chinese people were not allowed to own real estate. If a Chinese person wanted to own real estate, they had to find someone else to front for them and and hope that they could trust that individual. Eventually, my grandmother worked hard. Believe it or not, she became a realtor and ultimately a real estate broker. So she showed me the power of perseverance and not taking no for an answer, while at the same time showing me the importance of giving back to the community, where in some instances she was managing properties that were had residents of underserved populations. And she showed me by example how to make sure that we are always respectful when we are dealing with absolutely everybody that we come into contact with. The other half of my family came from Europe. This is my Jewish side, and they were tailors. So they came to the United States and brought skills with them and built their own business. Also in California, I'm transplanted, happily. But they too provided me with excellent examples of what it takes to take care of your family, the risks as well as the rewards and the hard work that's necessary, which I know all of you are dealing with on a daily basis. So I have a lot of respect for the work you're doing.
So we always, think about philanthropists as a singular entity. There are things such as pooled funds, and at the foundation, we actually host some of those. Jacqui's part of one of those hosted or pooled funds. Jacqui, talk a little bit about how how the women in your group like to operate in terms of their philanthropy.
I am part of an organization in Northfield which is called WINGS. That's our acronym, and of course everybody uses that acronym, but ours stands for Women in Northfield Giving Support. It was started a little over 20 years ago by a few women who really had amazing foresight into how to bring together the women of our community to help provide support for women and youth in our community. A few years back, and this happens to be part of Minnesota St. Paul Foundation, and this is how I came to know and understand the work that's done at the Minnesota and St. Paul Foundation. They're our fabulous back office. This group of women, I think right now we may have a little over 250 members. This is in a town of about 20,000 to 22,000 people, depending upon whether school is in session at St. Olaf and Carleton, to be quite honest. We've given out more than $1 million over the course of the past 20 years and have nearly $1 million in our endowment. So this has been a concentrated effort. A few years back, there was a call from our members that they wanted to help women with their businesses. We started a Women's Entrepreneur Fund, and with the help of St. Paul and Minnesota Foundations, we collaborated with Southeast Minnesota Initiative Fund. We granted money. It was organized and managed by what we call SMIF, and they found women entrepreneurs in our area. And not only did they provide funding, but also that really important business knowledge. It really opened the eyes for a lot of women in our community about the needs, which we constantly learn about every day, but also the needs and the struggles of entrepreneurs that many people had not been aware of before.
Thank you so much, Jacqui. The other thing that we want to talk a little bit about is the fact that philanthropy comes in many forms. I think a lot of people think about that transaction and philanthropy in terms of dollars, but there are many ways for us to give back. So Conrad, this question's for you in terms of how have you been able to give back? Not necessarily financially, but you have been extremely active with MEDA because of the support they provided you. What are you doing now to give back to the other entrepreneurs who are a part of the MEDA family?
Well, I've always been a dreamer, and I pursue my dreams of being an entrepreneur and risk everything to leave a corporate job to do that. I was very fortunate that MEDA was there to be supportive, and we get to the phase where we're at, and I'm at the phase where I'm still growing, but because of some of my experiences, I was always asked to help mentor some of those who want to follow the same path. In fact, I was connected with a fellow that is about to leave Medtronic. Don't tell him that, but he's a pretty high-level guy, but he wanted to do the same thing, and just kind of mentoring him through the process. And a lot of times, it's really just having somebody there along the way, and that's one of the ways that I could provide support to give back. But you think about the bigger picture of all this when we talk about DEI. Just imagine if we could replicate thousands of cortex, maybe 10,000s of cortex. Can you imagine that economic rebalancing and the economic trickle down and the cascading of those? And you talk about impact, right? From the St. Paul Foundation, just the fund that you provided through via META or what Jacqui is doing, and you could replicate those with the cortex of the world, and we could change, just through that. And I'm just playing a small piece and making sure that, I contribute positively toward that goal.
Well, I do love all the love that we're getting up on the stage for the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation. This was not a commercial for the foundation by any means, but love all the love that you're giving us. Andy, again, going back to stories, can you think of a story from META where you would think that the audience could find some value in just any lessons learned that for an organization or for a company that you guys supported, or something very unique and interesting? I know that we've supported a few interesting startups.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, my go-to story is Conrad, so he's telling his right now, so I have to dig a little bit. But Conrad's exactly right. Like, imagine thousands of Conrads in Minnesota and across the country. And that's what META is trying to do. And it is with the support of philanthropy, whether it's the St. Paul Foundation or other foundations or corporations. We can't do what we do without that support. 70% of our budget comes from philanthropy. And almost all of our lendable assets are through PRIs, program-related investments, which are below market rate investments in META that we then lend out. And those are from philanthropic sources. So the philanthropy is a very important part to META's success, and META is just one of a dozen or 24 organizations like ours in the Twin Cities and hundreds around the country. But a couple of things come to mind. We've got a longtime client who now sits on the board, and back in the late 90s, she was working for a bank and had invested in a group home and wanted to leave the bank and begin starting a business with a group home. So she went to this bank and asked for a commercial loan, and they wouldn't give it to her. Her bank that she was employed with wouldn't give her a loan to help. So she ended up at META, which providing the technical assistance, the capital. We've been working with her for over 20 years. She now has over 100 employees, well over $5 million a year in annual revenue, all coming to META because she couldn't get a loan from the bank that she worked for to start this company. And that story is not that specific one, but most of the people come to us for capital because they can't get a loan either from a bank or from their bank, or they don't have bank contacts. So we really work on that. And one of the St. Paul Foundations, this is one of my favorite stories, one of the St. Paul Foundation PRI supported a gentleman less than a mile away from here who he had big feet. So he started a company called XL Shoes. And the smallest size that he sells is size 13, and he sells them online all across the company. And META, with the help of St. Paul Foundation, helped invest in his digital operation, his marketing, inventory, those sort of things. And he's continues to do well. I drove past his store on the way here. So there's all these ideas, from Cortec to XL Feet to group homes, manufacturing, all sorts of places that you can have impact as an entrepreneur. And I would say at META, again, our sweet spot is in that scalable place, right? Looking for businesses that have survived the startup phase for the most part, but still need the capital and the technical assistance to grow. But as founders, you need those resources as well after the VC investment, after after you hit a financial gain. In order to continue to grow your business, you need term debt and lines of credit, and we're really focused on real estate loans because we're really looking at ownership, buying the property that the BIPOC businesses on or in, increases the wealth and stability in that business. So we have all these resources available, not just for startups, but for those emerging scalable businesses.
Yeah, I was going to share that example if you didn't, because XL Feed is one of the stories that we like to share because we've supported them through our donor-led PRI. And what's interesting about that is those dollars are given philanthropically by these donors, lent out through organizations like MEDA or the Neighborhood Development Center or Land Bank Twin Cities, a lot of these great organizations doing this philanthropic work in the community. And those dollars get returned to the donors at some point and then recycled out again. So that's what we love, is the fact that these dollars are recycled constantly through our donors. And something I just saw right before we came up on stage were some statistics from a book called Turning Wealth into What Matters by Dana Holt. And I wanted to share a couple of things that I found very interesting in this space. So entrepreneurs are some of the most generous segments of American society. And according to a study by Fidelity Charitable, entrepreneurs give 50% more to charity. Think about that. Nearly twice as many consider giving a very high amount of money, but also they find it as a priority, a high priority. And then also 69% say they want to incorporate charitable giving in their exit plans. And so that's the next topic I want to talk a little bit about, is an exit plan. So you're a startup, you do really well, you're going to sell your business, and you're going to have a huge taxable event when you do that. There's something you should know before you talk to somebody about selling your business, because I think there's a way that you can give back to the community, be one of those charitable partners, one of those donors. So this question is going to be for Jacqui. Jacqui, what do you need to consider before you talk to somebody about selling your business? So a prearranged sale. Don't do that until you take some of this advice.
That is the number one. Don't sign your name on the dotted line. Do not prearrange the sale. If you consider giving an interest in your business to a charity before you get into those discussions, negotiations, and before you sign on the dotted line, you have the ability to take a wonderful tax deduction for that, and that's at fair market value. That is weighed or is credited against your income. It's at a slightly lower percentage rate, but the cost savings to you are very, very high. The other thing to think about is, as you're getting into this, there's always some fear of giving up control or giving up a piece of ownership. I've talked about that, and I've emphasized that with you already. So then you can also think about breaking things into pieces. I did have one client who was interested in selling their business, and just as Andy said, it was on a piece of real estate. What we did was we separated the business from the real estate. And when we did that, that allowed this business owner to give a piece of the business, but not the real estate, to the charitable organization. The importance here is the need for appraisals. The IRS will not take our word for it. I think you all know that. The IRS wants to see some definite numbers before they will acknowledge even our incomes. So why not with a charitable gift? Because it means less money going to the government. The cost analysis can be a little more expensive, a little more daunting when we're looking at a business, but there are ways around that, and there are different ways to value a business, not just items on the shelf, income, opportunities. There are different ways. So an income stream analysis can tend to be a little high. So just be sure that you're talking with somebody about that and arranging that transfer prior to signing anything. Of course, if you also have lenders involved, the lenders need to know that you're transferring ownership on part of your business. Most of them will have if not a due on sale clause, they want to prevent you from giving up interests in the business without them knowing about it.
So we've talked a lot to the entrepreneurs and the startups in the audience and online. But one of the things that people don't realize is there are folks here in the room who are also philanthropists who have private foundations and such. And one of the things that I think that is important for folks to know is that between 7 to 9% of America's wealth is in cash, and the rest is in what we call non-cash assets. So stocks, real estate, cryptocurrency is a big one, right? So at the foundation, we've been doing a lot of work around non-cash assets. And the reason I bring this up is because these are assets that can go into funds and then be granted out to nonprofit organizations or entrepreneurs, organizations like MITA. So Jacqui, have you worked on any non-cash asset transactions with your business?
Yes, we have, and in addition to our real estate or our homes, most people have a lot of wealth contained in their retirement accounts. Your retirement account, for the most part, you've never paid income tax on it, so after you pass, income tax is paid once the money comes out. If you've given part of your retirement account to a charitable organization by a simple beneficiary designation, that charity does not have to pay income tax. You have just maximized the dollars that you've been able to give towards whatever issues you want to support. So thinking about those sorts of gifts, those are really important. If you are of a certain age, over 70, you can give retirement account assets during your lifetime, but I don't think anybody's that old up here.
The other thing that I think most people don't realize too is that it's not just about stocks and real estate. So at the foundation, we also can accept assets of grain. We can take in cows. I mean, I know it seems really weird, but we've had somebody call and say, hey, so we'd like to donate some cows. Can you guys take that? If there's a market for it, we can take it, and we can transition those dollars into amazing funds for donors. Andy, I'm just curious with MITA, so you said you live on a farm. There's a lot of transaction in the farming community these days. We have a lot of parents who are retiring from the farm and who want to pass it on, but their children don't want it. Do you know any examples in your community or through MITA where you guys have helped farmers or those outside of the Twin Cities with their startups or their
Yeah,
businesses?
absolutely. 20% of our clients are in Greater Minnesota, so we see a lot of agriculture work that we support. A lot of hydroponic, or those sort of things. There's a mushroom farm in northern Minnesota that we've provided lending and technical assistance to. But so we see that. We also worked with the Department of Agriculture in distributing some pandemic relief funding and those sort of things. So absolutely. But for my purposes, there's a couple of pigs that we would really like to get rid of off our farm that I'll be bringing up tomorrow.
Okay, so I mean, funny but not funny. So there are things such as combines, right? They depreciate pretty quickly, and a lot of times people don't find or know that there's value in combines or equipment. And so that's just another example of a piece of equipment that we can accept in the donor space, is that if you have a highly depreciated asset like a combine, and if there's a market for it, we can actually sell that and put those dollars right back into, say, like a donor advised fund for our donors who then are very charitable. So, we laugh about those things, but there are a lot of things, if you think about it, from art to all kinds of collections that people don't see value other than their own personal value, that actually can be sold for charitable purposes. Conrad, any parting words on your part before I get into some resources for folks before we close out our session? Anything else you'd like to share?
You know, it took me 20-something years to actually pursue my dream. And I know many entrepreneurs always thought I was a dream. For me, it was, you know, a young kid growing up in the refugee camp, just BSing around with other kids about one day become something. And that evolved into this visualization of being an entrepreneur, an owner. But then I got into the corporate world when I graduated. And you know, when you're working for someone and you're constantly being challenged and growing, it's harder to really follow your dream. Because every couple of years I get sent somewhere and I'm doing something different, and then I come back and I get sent somewhere again and I have to relearn. And 20-something years later, I'm still not following that dream. And until like actually I made a trip to Europe, and I was supposed to actually meet with the Ministry of Health of the UK on one of the products, you know, a procedure that we're supposed to launch. And instead of preparing for that meeting, all I did was constantly thinking about this one venture that I was nursing in my mind, and that's when I knew I got to do something, otherwise it will never happen again. So when I came back from that trip, I said, I really have to cut the cord, and I quit my corporate job to go feed in. I mean, so my point of saying all that is that for those aspiring to be entrepreneurs or you working on something, you got to start somewhere, but if you don't make that happen, I could visualize and I could tell you every single meeting and all that in my mind for 20 years, and it never happened until I actually started something. So it's all about starting. You know, that first journey, that first step is super important, and that's what counts.
So when Conrad told me his story, I also immigrated from Vietnam, and I also know how our families would feel if we worked in the corporate sector for 20 years and became super successful and then called our parents and said, hey, you know what, I'm hanging up my hat in the corporate world and I'm gonna start something. I can only imagine what that conversation was like in your household in terms of, what are you doing? But look at you now, right?
I didn't tell them that was the truth.
Of course, of course you didn't.
You know, we're coming from a cultural, supportive family environment, but support to them a lot of ways is making sure that we're okay. And okay meaning working for someone and you're moving up in the world, you're holding all this position, why change? You know, that's kind of very conservative. So I knew in order for me to be an entrepreneur, I have to quit my job and really, truly 100%, 150% committed, you know, with all the risk that comes with it. And I didn't even tell my family until I did it. And I told them, by the way, this is what I'm doing.
Smart guy.
That's actually how I made it happen.
Like I said, in your bio, smart guy, right? Jacqui, anything else you want to share?
I do. I'm just so honored to be up here, and I love your story, Conrad. I admire that, but I'm not a risk taker. That's why I'm an attorney, okay? Also, I think the other piece, so we've talked about the trickle-down effect of entrepreneurs as far as the financial piece, but I don't think we can discount the wonderful trickle-down effect socially and individually. As long as our children have hope that they can do something in this world, they will be able to form their own dreams and make good decisions in life. If children think that there is no hope for them and they can't get anywhere in this world, then where's the reason to even try? And I want everybody to know that they have the ability to try, and certainly with organizations by MEDA, you get it started and they will be able to help you take it further, and that's an amazing resource to have.
Andy, anything else on your mind?
No, I would just say thank you to Conrad and Jacqui both. If you're an entrepreneur, a BIPOC entrepreneur looking for help and needing support, come to MEDA. Check us out. We'll be there for you.
So we shared a lot of examples and organizations today. So a couple I want to just leave you with. So I mentioned a couple of these, and so I'll share them now as we end our time together, because I want to give you some resources that you can look up on your own. So of course, you can look at the Minnesota Council on Foundations. Again, that was the organization, or that is the association that is working on impact investing. That's that $112 million committed that I was talking about earlier. So look up on their website about impact investing. And then, of course, the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, so my shop. And on our website, you can look up our PRI work. And on there, you're going to find folks like MITA and the Neighborhood Development Center and Land Bank Twin Cities, who's helping us buy real estate for the nonprofit and BIPOC sector so that they can generate their wealth, because we know that through real estate, that's how we generate immense wealth. Also, Jacqui had mentioned the Initiative Foundation. So there's an organization called the Minnesota Initiative Foundations, and there are 11, 12? They've grown in number, but there are quite a few of them all across the state. So the Initiative Foundations have what they call the Initiators Fellowship, and they do a 2-year suite of services of support, and that includes training, mentoring, and funding. And they support those from the beginning and early stages of entrepreneurship all across the state, again, in central, southwest, northwest, and west central Minnesota. So yet another resource for you. I want to thank you all for the time today. We had a great time preparing for this talk for you. It's not often that you're going to get some great advice, free legal advice in these workshops. And then, of course, Conrad. I mean, he talked about his dream. He talked about his passion. I know that burns in, through you and those who are watching us today. If you have a passion for something, know that there are others before you, behind you, that are making those dreams come alive. And then, of course, I mean, the work that we do at the foundation can't be done without the important organizations like MITA and, like I said, the Neighborhood Development Center. These are organizations that are working hand in hand with entrepreneurs and nonprofits to make sure that they're part of the vibrant community in Minnesota, and so we thank them for all of the work that they do. Any last questions in the audience that we should take? I can't guarantee that we'll have the right answer for you, but anybody have a question that you want to ask in the last 4 minutes that we have together? I mean, you have a lawyer on the stage. I'm just saying. I'm probably not going to be able to give you that great advice, but she might be able to.
That's a question. Do you have one question from the live stream?
Yes. Okay. Someone asked, what is the website for the Impact Investing Organization?
The website for Minnesota Council on Foundations, I believe, is mcf.org.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, well, thank you all very much for your time today, and I hope you learned a lot from these wonderful panelists today, and we hope that you have a great rest of the day and week with Twin Cities Startup. Again, thank you all for being here today.